From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D4-3. Derek, we love gaming, but when it comes to the companies behind gaming, that's not always reciprocal. We're not feeling the love after some news last week. We have some thoughts, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, on today's show, we bring you some sad news. Sony announced that physical disc production will end in January of 2028 for new games released on PlayStation consoles. This was not received well by most, Andrew, with petitions being signed by hundreds of thousands and sent to Sony. We will be discussing our thoughts, community reactions, and what it means for the future of gaming. So, Andrew, let's kick this off by reading Sony's announcement, which is on their website, but was also part of a tweet on July 1st. This tweet has 137 million views at this time and almost 100,000 comments, most of which are from people pushing back. The article is titled, Physical Disc Production Ending in January 2028 for New Games Releasing on PlayStation Consoles. As consumer preferences and the broader entertainment industry continue to shift away from physical discs to digital, physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will be discontinued starting January 2028. Following this date, new games will be available on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. This transition has no impact on games that are already released or will be releasing prior to January 2028 in disc format. This is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. This transition will enable us to align more closely with how most of our community prefers to access and play games today. We'll continue to prioritize our resources to drive innovation and how players can access games and provide choices as to where players prefer to purchase new games, whether that's at retailers or PlayStation Store. We remain committed to delivering a world-class gaming experience to our fans, and we thank you for your continued support. So I'm going to give my thoughts, and I'm going to throw it over to you. This is an attack on ownership, sharing, and your wallet. The announcement and other statements from Sony are filled with falsehoods that don't line up with the truth, which includes omitting context around digital and physical ownership numbers. Having the ability to physically own games is vital to preservation and discoverability. Games are also often cheaper in physical form than in digital, and you can own and go back to that game forever if you would like. There are concerning terms in the TOS related to losing your PlayStation account after 36 months if you have not logged in, resulting in you losing the games you already bought that were attached to the account. My concern here isn't just related to video games either, Andrew. It's everything. And it makes me think of the 2016 essay published by the World Economic Forum, which included the statement, "You will own nothing and be happy." It envisioned a hypothetical 2030 sharing economy where people rent or borrow what they need rather than holding physical assets like homes, cars, or appliances. So yeah, again, I think this is an attack on ownership, sharing, and your wallet, and I'm worried what it means for the future.
Honestly, I think anybody with any sense, any idea of the big picture, is concerned about this. This comes on the heels of Sony announcing the removal of so many movies purchased to the PlayStation Store. You know, we've already seen the loss of ownership in this past week, and this is what people are pointing out. You know, coming on the heels of that announcement, Sony is basically echoing the title of that essay. You'll own nothing and like it. And I certainly don't like it. I understand that a lot of people do buy digitally. I buy digitally. You buy digitally. But I still like physical media, and a lot of people do. The fact that they've gone silent on social media after this announcement, because there was a lot of pushback to those social media posts and on the blog as well, on the PlayStation blog, people criticizing the decision, saying, what trend is this? We didn't ask for this. We're not happy about it. So yeah, it's been nice to see the pushback. Obviously, I'm not saying that there hasn't been some trend towards digital, Derek, but it really seems like they're exaggerating it.
Yeah, there's been people calling this out as well, including on PlayStation's official message board. And Sony is taking down those posts. And it also seems like they're being removed from Reddit as well. One example is a post that said they're lying about digital versus physical sales. 85% includes PS Plus, DLC, indies, etc., and games that were never even released in physical form. So the only option people had to get those games was to buy them digitally. And from an Insomniac leak, just to give you an idea of how that 85% number is BS. God of War Ragnarok sold 76% of their games in physical form. 24% was digital. Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, was 63% physical, 37% digital. Astrobot, 55% physical, 45% digital. Marvel Spider-Man 2, 54% physical, 46% digital. Assassin's Creed Mirage, 49% physical, 51% digital. Resident Evil 4 Remake, 45% physical, 55% digital, etc. So the whole 85% digital, 15% physical, people just are, the physical media is just not on demand anymore, is BS, because it's missing a whole lot of context, which, like I stated, includes DLC, which includes games that aren't even released in physical form, basically all indie games that don't have a physical release, etc.
Yeah, the website, thegamebusiness.com, took a look at those figures, mentioned some of the figures that you just noted, and that article was citing sales in Europe, but it seems that that's the way worldwide as well.
And think about this, too. This is telling. Lifetime U.S. sales data shows that 82% of PlayStation 5 consoles sold are the disk drive version. Conversely, digital-only editions make up just 18% of total sales in the region. Think about that. Why are people getting the disk drive versions, Andrew? They want to be able to use physical media. They're buying physical media, and they want to be able to use it on the console. They want to be able to own that media. They want to be able to share it if necessary, etc. That is jaw-dropping. There was a great post by Rhino at Rhino the Bouncer on Twitter. He states, "Here's what digital-only gaming means. If your account is hacked, lost, or suspended, you lose the games you paid for. If the PSN or any service network is down, you can't access games you paid for. If you change your region, by their terms, you need to create a new account because they have no account region change or transfer, so you lose the games you paid for. If you don't use your account for 36 months, you lose the games you paid for because Sony, by their terms, will take steps to close the account." And I saw that language in the TOS. If you aren't connected to the internet, you cannot access the games you paid for. If a digital license expires or any falling out occurs between the digital storefront and the game studio or publisher, you will lose access to the games you paid for, like when they removed 500 movie purchases without compensation just 2 weeks ago. He continues, "So if you consider this the future and the evolution, cool, enjoy. Not everyone likes to be cucked by corporations and scammed for their money over things they bought and paid for." Love that post. It tells a story, and he's not wrong.
Not at all. And of course, the other thing that's being pointed out, and it's very true, is that with digital storefronts, it's often more expensive. And certainly, being in Australia as I am, in Australia, in Europe, other regions, the prices aren't always reflective of local value. When they do convert that currency into the local currency, we often end up paying more for games. And you have no choice with digital only. With physical media, you could shop around, different stores offered different sales. Quite often new releases have been available physically in Australia for at least $20 cheaper than the digital versions. So again, this is anti-consumer. It doesn't benefit us in any way. Certainly doesn't benefit our wallets. And this is where people say, "Oh, you're broke, don't get in the game if you can't afford it." And that's just asinine. The idea that affordability, that competitive pricing is a bad thing, that you should overpay for your hobby, is just ridiculous. We hate the whole "you're broke" argument. It is so toxic, it is so classist, it is so bootlicking of corporations. Absolutely ridiculous. And of course, availability. Not all titles are made available worldwide. When you had physical releases, especially once they got rid of region locking with the last couple of generations of consoles, you could import from other countries. So there was flexibility there. You could import these games, enjoy them, even if they weren't released in your region. So yeah, so many drawbacks to digital only.
Yeah, and I want to get back to that claim that 85% of games bought on PlayStation are digital. So Canadian guy on Twitter kind of broke down these numbers, and he states, spoiler, it's not out of 100 copies of Spider-Man sold, 85% are digital. Here's how they calculate it. Digital units sold divided by total units sold times 100. Straightforward, right? In Q4 of 2025, Sony sold 74.6 million units in total. That is both digital and physical units. But the 85% of all games bought are digital has a huge skew to it. Why? Because there are thousands of digital-only games that do not get physical releases. Think the $5 to $20 indie titles or digital-only ports of older games. However, those digital sales are counted against the physical sales, meaning even if everyone who stopped buying physical in the past 5 years went out and bought one game a month, digital will still dominate physical because mostly everything that's physical is also digital, but very little that is digital is also physical. So he goes on, but I just want to let you know that those numbers that they spewed were complete BS. It's also important to note that people have been posting what they paid for a physical version of a game at a GameStop, at a Best Buy at times if it's on sale, at a mom and pop store, and how much money they saved buying that game. Right? Because it's cheaper in physical form. Oftentimes the prices on the PlayStation Store are higher and stay much higher. A good example of what this could cause in the future, we've talked about it before, past NBA 2K releases on Steam, what do they usually stay at? $60, right?
Yeah.
Even it's been 4, 5, 6, 7 years out, if that game is still on Steam and you can pick it up, they keep that price at $60. So if you want that game, that's what you got to pay, unless you want to go get that physical copy, right, Andrew? And I've talked about it before. You can get these physical copies for much cheaper of those games. For example, I'll use an example like NBA 2K14. NBA 2K14 Xbox One, I can get that for under $2 at like a mom and pop store, even at GameStop when it's there. NBA 2K15, NBA 2K16, 2K17, 2K19, you can get those for like under $20 pretty much anywhere you go in physical form. So that's one of the other reasons why it's so important for physical media to be there. Not only for the ownership aspect, but it's not going to hurt your wallet as much. These games become more affordable, and then you have them for life.
Exactly. And staying with NBA 2K, as you may recall, Derek, NBA 2K18, one of the last games they really left up beyond the server shutdown. They've gotten better, well, better from a certain point of view, and I'll get to that in a moment, of delisting games once the servers are shut down. Because they were still selling the special edition of NBA 2K18, the Legends Edition with Shaq, the gold cover, after the servers were shut down. Everything about that Legends Edition, the digital copy anyway, at least with a physical copy, you get that special cover that you can put on a shelf and collect. But as far as the digital version goes, having all those extras in that Legends Edition version that you can't use once the servers were shut down. So they were selling, still full-priced, the Legends Edition of NBA 2K18 after the servers were shut down, and all of those bonuses were absolutely useless. Now, they have started removing them, delisting the games, as the servers are getting ready to shut down. But to that point, Derek, if you want to collect these games, if you want to get the PC version of NBA 2K, you need to grab it while you can, hopefully when it's on sale, because if it's delisted, sure, you might be able to track down a Steam key from some sites, some of them more reputable than others, but you miss out when games are delisted. They're not there floating around on the second-hand market. It's terrible for collectors, and you and I are collectors, so we know this firsthand.
Not only that, they remove parts of the game when servers shut down. We've talked about this with NBA 2K.
Absolutely.
Right? My career, gone. My team, gone, etc. And what ends up happening, because they've been able to lean on digital sales and whatnot, is a lot of times we're getting games that are incomplete. They're unfinished. They require day one updates, another update a week later, another update 1 month later. It's still not finished. It still has bugs. They lean on updates. These things should have been fleshed out during the production process before release. And what ends up happening is back in the day when we got these games, they were finished. They had a beginning, a middle, an end, and what you bought is what you got, right? But now what ends up happening, and again, this is another problem related to the future of gaming and digital only and everything, is they can lean on that even more. You know what? You're going to pay $40, $50, $60, maybe $70 for a game. We don't have to have it completely finished. You know what? Here's some DLC you got to pay for. Oh, it needs an update. Oh, here's some more DLC. Before you know it, you spent about $200 for that game or $250 for that game. They can possibly take that away from you if you don't log into your account for 3 years, according to the TOS. They can take that game away from you. All of that money you spent. And for people that don't think that this is a big deal, I want you to think about the people that play my team on NBA 2K. Hundreds of dollars on that mode, right?
Thousands. Yeah.
A lot of times people spend, sometimes thousands, sometimes people spend hundreds to thousands of dollars on my career. They take that away from you in a little over 2 years when they shut down the servers, Andrew. All of that money that you spent, all those players that you bought, all those upgrades that you bought, those are gone. That money is gone. You can't enjoy that content for the rest of your life, even though you paid for it. That's why this is so important. Right? And I just want people to think about that when they state, well, everything's online today. Digital is a little bit more accessible, etc. It's just the sign of the times. What about the stuff that you pay for? Don't you want to own it? Don't you want to have access to it, etc.? It opens the door for a lot of issues in the future.
No doubt. Once again, people not looking at the big picture. And people say it's progress. People point to PC. Because a lot of people saying, well, I'm going to leave Sony behind, I'm going back to PC gaming. And people saying, well, PC has been digital for years now. And obviously that was a decision, a move, a change that not everybody likes. As convenient as Steam is and other digital platforms are, I do miss physical releases, having something tangible, having a cover to collect. But not everybody is a fan of that. It's been foisted upon us, so we have no choice. But to say that, oh, that's the way it is, so that's a good thing, is very short-sighted. And one of the reasons why I was disappointed with that move to digital on PC originally, aside from not having that physical collectible, was that living in Australia, as I do, didn't have a fast connection. Have a faster connection now, still not the fastest, as you know. At the time, had a data limit on my internet plan. So downloading even a 15-gigabyte game, 10 years ago, I'd have to set aside some time. I have to make sure that I have enough of my data limit left for the month to use that up on the download. Now, things have gotten better here in Australia and elsewhere around the world, but not everybody has a great internet connection, or big data limits, or unlimited data, or whatever. There are people living in rural areas that don't have great internet. Having the disc, being able to install the game off that disc, saving that download, you just have to download the day one patch. I know a lot of day one patches, you basically have to download the game again, in some cases, making it a moot point, but still being able to install part of the game off a disc has been so useful for a lot of people who don't have that great internet connection. And that is not their fault. That is the infrastructure that they have to deal with wherever they live. So yeah, to say that people don't want to get with the times, or they're broke, or whatever, is just so myopic.
Yeah, I also want to point out that Steam's TOS is not as strict as PlayStation's either. From Steam, it states Steam does not delete accounts due to inactivity. If you have purchased games, items, or software on your account, Valve will never delete it. Accounts are only terminated if you manually submit a request through Steam support, or if the account is banned for violating the Steam subscriber agreement. It's also worth pointing out, Andrew, that back on June 11th, 2013, Sony dealt the final blow to Microsoft, which had just given a very convoluted presentation for its Xbox One. They were being accused of trying to destroy the used game market by banning game sharing. And the company nearly didn't survive E3 2013 as a result. Sony, in response, released a video in 2013 stating, "This is how you share your games on PS4." And it shows one gentleman holding a game disc and handing it to another gentleman who says, "Thank you." So back in 2013, they were the heroes, Andrew, because they were preserving physical media. They were saying, here, this is how you can share your games. Ownership and preservation are important, etc. And now they're the villains. I also want to point out that I don't expect Microsoft to be much different in this regard. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they go the same route, and we just haven't heard the announcement yet.
Yeah, I remember that video well. We covered it on the NLSC podcast all those years ago, because like everybody else, we saw that announcement by Microsoft, we scoffed at it, we saw Sony's response, and yeah, we applauded it at the time. Kind of reminds me a bit of how NBA 2K were once the darlings of basketball gaming, stepping up where EA Sports were failing, and giving us a better game, giving us better value for money. And then, once they defeated NBA Live, once NBA Live went away, they have become the villains. They've become what they sought to destroy with EA Sports. ironic, obviously. And speaking of irony, people have also pointed out that Sony pioneered a lot of optical disc technology, CD-ROMs, Blu-rays. They were all about optical media, Derek, inventing that technology, or certainly developing the prevailing format of that optical disc technology. So yeah, definitely ironic. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So let's get to some of the reactions on Twitter, followed by, getting the community's thoughts. I asked a community question related to this situation. But first, one of the reactions is from Naibi. He states, "Today I was supposed to meet someone at a plaza because they were going to sell me a secondhand Stellar Blade. I paid $35 for it. Out of curiosity, I checked on the PlayStation digital store and the game is $70. Novelty price. This is what Sony wants to take away from us." And yeah, that goes back to my point. Whether you want to be able to get a physical game on something like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, if anybody uses that, or at GameStop or a mom and pop store, etc. They're kind of taking that away from you.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we've said about basketball gaming. A lack of options is not good for the consumer.
Does It Play at Does It Play 1 states, "You are killing ownership. You are killing legal preservation. You are killing discoverability. You are killing publishers. You are killing developers. This is a move that might slightly improve bottom lines, but tear down every other aspect of this medium. Well done. You effed up."
Yeah, absolutely.
Brick at _Brick Guy states, "Wanted to buy Cyberpunk today. Saw it still at $60 on the PS Store. Checked how much local retailers were selling the physical form for and found it for $30. At the end of the day, that's all this is about. A monopoly only ensures every consumer loses." Like I said, this is an attack on your wallet. Trust me. Not just your wallet either. Look at today's youth. A lot of these games target children, right, and teens and whatnot. And a lot of these teens don't have their own money, and parents are footing the bill for these games and, the DLC and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, they're getting hit hard as well.
And the monopoly piece is important because at the moment on PC, you have Steam, you have the Epic Store, you have GOG, Good Old Games. You also have various sites selling Steam keys, and they often have sales, bundle deals. So you can shop around, get that better price. If you just have the PlayStation Store, and I know they're talking about having other options, we'll see how that pans out. But if you just have that PlayStation Store, you only have one storefront to buy these games. Again, they can just set the price, and what are we to do? If we want the game, have to pay it or go without. And again, this is where people say, "Oh, you're broke. If you want to be a gamer, just pay the price." But no, that's so anti-consumer. Why are you defending corporations? To the people who are saying that, why are you defending big corporations over your fellow consumers? Ridiculous.
Will own nothing and be happy, apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
Brian Nehmeyer at Brian Nehmeyer states, "Publishers say they're ending physical media because consumers stopped buying it. The truth is, shareholders wanted publishers to stop selling ownership." Pirate Nation at Pirate_Nation state, "Reddit moderators are removing posts criticizing Sony's physical versus digital sales comparisons from some PlayStation-related subreddits. In the past day, multiple users shared charts and older Sony data arguing that the company's headline digital sales percentages don't compare physical and digital versions of the same games. Some of those posts were later removed from certain subreddits, with users reposting them elsewhere after the originals were taken down by moderators." So yeah, like I said, there looks like there's some silencing going on. Right? And that's also a telling sign.
And this is why we need communities like ours, not to toot our own horn, and Discord servers, and other fan sites, and message boards, and subreddits, obviously, that aren't controlled by the companies. With the official subreddits, and official websites, and official social media and all that, sure, you do have straight from the source information, you have access to developers, etc. You have those advantages. but you also have this control, this silencing, to your point. So this is why fan communities and independent, fair coverage of gaming from content creators who you can trust is so important.
Stormslayer, HD Remaster's game dev, responded to a post that showed the TOS, and this is the PlayStation TOS. And I've read mixed reactions to this, somebody stating that this is the TOS for EU only, but that the US version has the same type of language in the TOS, but it doesn't give a time frame, which is equally as bad. But I'll read it. So this is the PlayStation TOS. It states 21.2. If you have not used your account for at least 36 months, we may take steps to close it. In that case, we will contact you via the email address registered to your account and give you 6 months to either log into your account or contact us and tell us to keep your account open. So basically what that's saying, if you don't log in during that time or contact them during that time, you will lose your account and everything that you paid for. So what about kids that go away to college, right? What if somebody was in a coma? What if somebody, did something with their life and were away for a few years and then, now wants to get back into gaming? Doesn't matter. You paid for the stuff, but hey, you know what? We're going to take it away from you. But Stormslayer responded with, this is why you have to bully the F out of companies. They will hide shady in the TOS to try to avoid a lawsuit and take advantage of the consumer. They literally do not stop until the law tells them otherwise. Forget digital licenses. All of us made accounts assuming we would have permanent ownership. Imagine no physical games, and on top of this, you lose access to your entire library because you didn't play for a while. LMAO. I hope people sue them into oblivion the day they decide to pull this shit. Effing cook them.
Yeah, and a lot of people are being very smart-ass about this, quite frankly, Derek, saying, oh, we never own games anyway. Look at the end-user license agreement. We license the right to the software, etc. But that's missing the point. That's missing the forest for the trees. Obviously, we don't own the code. We don't own the game in that respect. But unless you come and take my PS2 discs, my old CD-ROMs, DVD-ROMs for PC gaming, my Super Nintendo and original Nintendo cartridges, I own those games with the hardware to play them, as long as they function. Unless you come to where I live and take them away, that physical media, I own that copy of the game to use whenever. I can pop in my decades-old copy of Super Mario Bros. 3 that's still working and play it. It's different to what people are trying to make this smart-ass point about.
Sell them or share them, right?
Yeah.
If you want. PlaysWave at PlaysWave_com states, Sony is killing discs in 2028, but your $80 digital game can't be resold, loaned, or even owned. It's just a license. No manufacturing costs, no retail cut, yet the price never drops. The savings aren't passed to you.
And the other thing, of course, even if games do remain available, even if you don't lose access to the digital games, the developers, the publishers, can still make changes. You look what happened with the Grand Theft Auto games on Steam. At a certain point, they lost the rights to some of the songs, including Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, so they had to patch that out of the game. Are there patches that restore it? Sure. But the point is, content that was originally in the game, obviously the license has expired, it's a legal matter, but to that point, unless you come and take my original copies on PlayStation 2, or actually I do have disc versions of GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas on PC as well, unless you come and take those copies, I can still install them, play them if I wish, those original games intact. So this is what happens, Derek. Licenses run out, they have to patch out songs, patch out content. Digital versions can and will change.
You're at their mercy. Really. D's Games at _D's_Games states, heads up, Sony PlayStation are taking down any posts on Reddit which prove that they are lying about the physical versus digital sales comparisons and skewing the numbers. A lot of people are pointing out that they're taking down those posts. The Actman at the Actman_YouTube states, the PS4 won the 8th gen console wars almost entirely because Xbox shot itself in the face and Sony said, we're not doing any of that. Listen to the crowd cheering at the simple idea that they will own the games and the consoles they buy with no caveats. What happened, man? And he was quote tweeting a video posted by Nick Tech that stated the importance of physical discs explained by Sony themselves 13 years ago.
Yeah, once again, what's that quote from The Dark Knight? You either die the hero or live long enough to become the villain?
There it is. David Freeman at F_David_A states, another data point. Of the 93 million PS5 sold, 82% with disk drive and 18% were digital. Going back to my point, Andrew. So yeah, that's some reactions from around Twitter. But yeah, I'm not seeing, many people supporting this. I have seen some responses related to, this is the era we're in. I prefer buying my games digital anyway. It doesn't personally affect me, so I don't care. But I think that people that make those comments, if they want to go this route, that's fine. But please try to see the big picture as well.
And that's fine if you prefer digital. We understand the benefits. We buy digital too. Sometimes because we have no choice. Other times because it is convenient. Absolutely. But that is a myopic point of view. That's not considering that other people have other needs. And it's there in the wording, Derek. It doesn't affect me. And that's fine. But the world does not revolve around any one of us. And if there's a way to cater to both needs, to both tastes, I think that's the way to go. We see this zero-sum thinking among gamers, Derek. Not to go too off tangent, but you look at the minimum user situation with 2K Pro-Am, the connected mode in my career. When that mode first came in, you could play with a minimum of 3 users, and you'd have 2 AI players. And a lot of teams that we faced on the Australasian servers, Derek, only had 3 users. So it was fun to play sometimes with 3 or 4 users. Obviously it was a blast with all 5, but to be able to get in some games of 2K Pro-Am with 3 or 4 users was a lot of fun. They changed that to make it more like the home version of the 2K League. Why you'd want to be more like the 2K League, I don't know. But anyway, people didn't want to play with bots or against bots. I understand that. But they could have catered to both preferences by having that matchmaking option. Don't play with bots, or only matching up full squads with other full squads. That way, you don't have one preference at the expense of the other. And that's kind of what this is with digital versus physical. If there are still physical releases, that doesn't hurt digital at all. If you just want to buy digitally, you can keep doing that. People who want to buy physical copies can do that as well. There's zero-sum thinking where we don't stand with our fellow gamers, where we don't support solutions that can give both groups of consumers their preference without harming the other. We should support that, and yet we don't, because people like to smirk and say, my preference is right, you're missing out, ha ha, I'm right, you're wrong, this is the way games are, this is the way it should be, and that's not the case.
It's also important to note that the majority of the reaction to this announcement has been pushing back. It's been people pissed off about it, right? Trying to do something about it.
Where's the trend?
Signing petitions, etc. Right, exactly. That's the pulse, right? Yep. And that's important. So let's get to the NLSC community's responses to this situation. I asked, what are your thoughts on Sony ending physical disc production for new games starting in 2028? Red, this is terrible and has ripple effects that impact ownership, sharing, cost, etc. Yellow, not a fan, but digital only is fine. Or green, sign of the times, people need to get over it. So let's start with Twitter's responses. Andrew at Andrew the X states, it's terrible, but also a sign of the times. It is anti-consumer since it locks you into a single ecosystem. Even though PC is 100% digital, you can play via Steam, Microsoft, or directly from the developer, so you at least have some choice, and it helps to prevent price gouging. He continues, I buy 80% physical as it's cheaper than digital when new, and I could resell or trade in and get something back when I'm finished the game or find I don't like it. I'll only buy digital when physical is not available or digital is significantly cheaper, say half the price of physical.
Yeah, and of course, X is in Australia as I am, so he knows how it goes with those prices often being higher in digital storefronts than the physical copies that you can shop around for. The problems with internet connection, availability, etc. And people might say, well, that's just Australia, or that's just the power regions, that's just Europe. But the point is, gaming is worldwide. This hardware and software is being sold worldwide, so everyone's opinions are valid here, Derek.
MP3 Gaming at MP3_gaming states, I think it's a terrible decision. The price of games will stay the same despite not having to produce physical copies, as they also continue to make money for microtransactions, and the customer won't have physical copies to collect. He continues, I know on the PS4 at least the storage is low and the game size is high. Not sure what it's like on PS5, but I already have to make decisions on what games I have on the hard drive, as it takes a few hours to re-download a game. And I know that he has the slow internet like you do. Andrew. He continues, and this is about the TOS. He states, see, this gets even crazier. So if I don't play for 36 months, Sony will also take away my online collection. Imagine waking up from a 38-month coma to find out you lost your entire games library.
And yeah, that's the thing. There are so many ways that you can lose games and content that you've paid for. You know, what if your account is hacked and then there's suspicious activity on your account and it's closed down and you try and get it back and Sony's like, well, sorry, nothing we can do. Are there going to be any refunds? I doubt it. They're not refunding the purchase of these movies that they've removed from the platform. So, yeah, again, very anti-consumer.
And what person is going to go through the court process in order to try to get their account back? Right? They're not going to go after Sony, the average person. Yeah. They're not going to want to pay those attorney fees. They're not going to want to, they don't have time to go through that whole process. So you basically are stuck at that point and you just lose everything you paid for. Royce at RoyceBrink14 states, it is terrible and this looks to be the end of games on discs, cartridges, etc. It is a sad day, but one that had been talked about for a long time. I have seen some of the pushback and look forward to seeing more and to see if it has any effect on Sony. Part 2, he states, also looking forward to the podcast to hear what the NLSC community has to say and what Andrew and Derek have to say. Great job on the Steam Machine and NBA The Run episodes, by the way. #respect. So we appreciate you listening week in and week out, Royce. We love your commentary. We love when you respond to the community questions. So yeah, thanks for supporting the show.
Indeed, we appreciate the support, the kind words about those episodes. Obviously, that is what we strive to do, Derek, is to provide these nuanced takes, these honest takes on gaming, basketball, and otherwise. And he mentions the end of games on disc. And it's not just about future releases. It's also about retro gaming, classic gaming, whatever you want to call it. You know, with the launch of the 9th generation consoles, a lot of people opted for the disc versions, myself included, because of the backwards compatibility. If they're not releasing new games on disc, are they still going to provide on PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox? Are they still going to provide a disc drive so that you can have that backwards compatibility, so that you can still play those classics on the new console? Could be the end of backwards compatibility as well. And look how big that's been for years now with the consoles.
Not just that. What happens to stores like GameStop? Does it stay open and just turn into a shop that sells digital cards, right? Like cards that, you scratch off and you have to put in a code or something like that. What happens to these stores? Not only that, what happens to the price of physical games, past physical games? Could we see them go up now as a result because the demand is higher, because this is happening, et cetera? So I don't know. There could be a ripple effect in different ways that we haven't even been talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe they go retro, which would be kind of cool. And I've seen that EB Games, which is the Australian GameStop, they are selling retro games now. But to that point, often with eBay prices. Collectors and resellers, people who just get old games in order to resell them, flip them for a profit, have driven up the prices of these classic games. It's not a great time to get into collecting. We build our collections at the right time, Derek. And obviously there are some more recent releases, like you said, NBA 2K14 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, you can usually get for a couple of bucks from those places. But like you said, is that going to change? Are those stores going to sell those digital copies on card? I suppose at least you get a collectible cover. If that's the case, are they going to lean more into tabletop games, merch, Funko Pops, things like that? Certainly possible. Yeah, like you said, potentially a huge ripple effect here.
That's branded at BC Price 86. He chooses red, and he states, as a result, I refuse to buy GTA when it comes out because it is digital only. You never really own the games that way, and it can be taken away at any moment. Moving over to Discord, we did receive a couple of responses. 4 people chose red, so this is terrible and has ripple effects that impact ownership, sharing costs, etc. Maz, Scott Stevens fan 2003, Shy Guy, and Maddie A. VPW MMA also responded with red for sure. Sham God states red, green if I didn't play on the PS3 or 4 before 2020, since that's basically how people are defending this decision, is what it sounds like. Maddie A states, I'm sure Microsoft will fall asleep with Xbox as well. I'm an Xbox guy, but all these freaking companies are worried about is making money. They are not worried about providing a good game. All they want is money, kind of like politicians in that regard.
Yeah, and he echoes a point that you made earlier, that if you're counting on Microsoft to swoop in and save us here, that might be a little bit naive. I don't think that's going to happen. They're all big corporations. They're all looking at the bottom line, the shareholders. Yes, it's business. Yes, they have to make money. But also, fairness to the consumer matters. Value for money matters. So, stop licking those boots, people.
Luxor states, I'm in between red and yellow, to be honest. I had been all digital since late 2020, but I think physical deserves to stay. If music and movies can still have physical options, why can't games?
Yeah, and as he says, he prefers to buy digitally, which we understand the benefits of. But to his point, he's not saying, oh, that's my preference, it should be the only preference. We shouldn't be siding with the big corporations here, Derek. We should be standing with our fellow gamers, our fellow consumers.
Yeah, he also brought up another point in the Discord related to one of the frustrating things about buying physical games today is that sometimes you'll only get like half the game, right? Because there's so much other stuff on top of the game nowadays because everything is online and they lean on that. So whether it be updates or DLC, etc. But I think that's also part of the problem here, right? Is oftentimes when we get a game now, it's not complete. It's not a full release. And, there's games that die often in early access and they walk away with that money. I don't even think that early access should be a thing. I don't think that should exist. I don't think it should be allowed because I think a lot of times it's stealing consumers' money, to be completely honest with you. I could do a whole episode on how much I hate the idea of early access and how it's used and abused by companies, developers, etc. But the point is that that's another problem, is that games are often being released unfinished and they're leaning on patches. They're making you buy extra as it relates to whether it be virtual currency, microtransactions, updates for the game, or, oh, you can't access this area until you put this money in, or you can't get this piece of armor, or, you can't unlock this season pass unless you pay, etc. Like, it is ridiculous, and I can't believe how much money people are putting into these games nowadays.
And not to harp on how much we hate the you're broke argument, although it is always worth pushing back on, but the idea that gaming should only be for people with tons of disposable income. We grew up renting games, Derek, from video stores. Unfortunately, they've fallen by the wayside for the most part. I've heard that a lot of libraries do offer game rentals as well. Why are we gatekeeping gaming? Why would anyone be against people with less income, putting a little bit aside to rent some games, and just play that for the weekend? This elitism, this classism, this you're broke, this whole I'm happy to overpay for things like it's a flex. Yeah, I just hate that attitude amongst gamers these days.
It's also not just people with low income, right? Or that don't have the money. There's a lot of people that don't think that it makes sense to do it, that they don't want to spend over the top of the price they already paid for the game.
They value their money,
right. They value their money. They also, a lot of people also have that moral compass where it's like, you know what? I'm not going to let this company take advantage of me. You know what I mean? I don't want to feed more money into this machine. I'm not going to do it. So all of that is ridiculous and all of it is BS, in my opinion. But that's it for the responses on Discord. Andrew, did we get any other responses on other social media platforms?
We had some people weigh in on Facebook. The news has certainly struck a chord with people. Mark says, bad idea. John responds, red, no more Christmas presents as games. And yeah, what's it going to be, Derek? Are you going to hand people that box with the code in it? That's better than nothing, I suppose. It's a physical thing to get on Christmas Day or on your birthday, but it's not as exciting. You can't just pop that in. Well, these days with updates, you can't necessarily pop in a game and start playing it anyway, but there's even more steps. You hand people a code, or you hand people a gift card. Oh, go and buy the game you want. That's nice and all, but it's just not as special as a gift. Think of all the great gaming-related gifts you've received over the years, Derek, and obviously I can relate to opening up that new console, opening up that game you've been anticipating. Yeah, you lose that excitement.
I agree. Do they tell the child that receives the gift that he may lose it if he doesn't log into his account? Do they tell the kid that there's probably, $10 to $20 or more of DLC that they may need to get for that game if they want to access certain areas or, get all of the content? Do they tell the kid that microtransactions could be involved if they want to skip a grind, etc.? I don't know. Probably not. But yeah, it's not as special. When we got those games when we were younger and on Christmas Day or on our birthdays and whatnot, you knew the game you got was complete, and it was really exciting getting that physical game.
Dylan says, I don't really care personally. I've been buying digital since the Xbox One and PS4 came out. It's just more convenient. Shrug emoji. And look, I respect the choice of going digital. I have digital games as well. Like we said, Eric, you and I do buy digitally when it makes sense, or we have no choice. But respectfully, Dylan, that's not looking at the big picture. That's not looking at the reasons why people buy physical, may prefer it, or that may be their best option. Sure, it doesn't affect you personally, but it affects other people. And again, we should stand with our fellow gamers and consumers.
You have to think of the big picture, and you can't just think about it related to gaming. Will you be happy owning nothing? I think this has a ripple effect. I think that it doesn't just go for games. It can go for movies. It could go for TV, things like streaming services and whatnot. This could just be the beginning of a lot of BS.
Both Cross Charles and Gilbert answered green, and I understand the view that this is the future. It's just the way it is. But look, people are right to push back on this decision. And respectfully, I think both we and a lot of people in the community have given very fair reasons why physical media should stick around.
Absolutely. And, I really can't stand the whole, it's a sign of the times, or, it's what's happening, so we just have to accept it. No, if something doesn't make sense, if it's not logical, if it pushes the world in a direction that's not fair to the people, then, yeah, you should speak up. You shouldn't just go with the flow, and you should let yourself be heard.
Brad responded yellow, says concerning. Also adds, not positive, but I think I'm okay. My Xbox Series X, I have an external 1TB drive, which fills up quick. However, I believe I can still play if games are completely removed. I don't think PlayStation has that option. I will also not buy any game that does not have offline mode. Yeah, and obviously we've talked about issues with online only, forcing online only in single-player games. There are various methods to extend the storage of both Xbox and PlayStation, but that is the other big thing with digital, Derek. With the consoles, they want to have these quick loading times. That does mean installing to an internal SSD so that the data can be read quickly, the games load almost instantaneously. That is the big feature of the current generation of consoles, but it does fill up these drives very quickly, and you have to rotate games. And of course, if they're digital only, all those big downloads all over again. So, yeah, it's an issue.
Where I'll say he's definitely on the right track is getting these games that at least have an offline option, right? Like he's thinking about that. He's like, I want to be able to play these games offline whenever I want, and I don't have to depend on a server or online gaming, etc.
Guessing that Brad is not a fan of NBA The Run.
Yeah, probably not. And that player base has almost completely died out, which more than likely we'll be touching on the next episode of the NLSC podcast.
Carlo says, not a fan of digital. Russell says, I'm ending my Sony purchase collection. They're effing tracking. I don't care what anyone says, and I won't be paying $100 for any game. So yeah, a lot of customer loyalty is being tested here, Derek.
Yeah, it sounds like we've been negative lately on the NLSC podcast. We've had hundreds of episodes that were mostly positive, so let me just say that. But, not a lot that's going on in the gaming world right now is positive, right? We've had the Steam machine with the ridiculous prices, $100 for a controller, around $1,500 to, buy the best version, $1,000 to get in the front door, to get the lowest priced one. Then you had our review of NBA The Run, which we had to score low, a 5 out of 10 because of lack of depth, no offline couch play, repetitive gameplay loop, poor gameplay depth, etc. It's an online only game, and all signs point to us being right about the reception of that game and about the player base. But yeah, there's just been a lot of blah in the gaming world when it comes to new consoles, new games, TOS, companies' announcements, etc. So yeah, we try to be positive on here, but we're also going to be honest when something just doesn't sit right with us.
Yeah, we absolutely would prefer to be positive, to enjoy our hobby. So maybe we'll have to lean more into retro gaming, Derek. And to that point, Joe says, I think this made me a permanent retro gamer, to be honest. I'll never not use physical discs, even though I have digital games as well. Sounds like us. We will buy digital games. We have a use for them, but we still see the benefits of physical media.
My basketball video game collection as it relates to physical form is huge. You've seen some of it. I have over 100 basketball video games in physical form, and I have all the consoles for them as well. So I'll always have that collection to go back to. And yeah, I own those games. If I want to share those with somebody, I can. If I want to sell one, I can do that as well. I won't sell them because you know how much we love our collections, Andrew, but I have it, and that's awesome.
And a couple more responses here. Once again, people are very passionate about this topic, understandably so. Sean says, end of the sport athlete game cover. And I imagine they'll still have athletes as faces of the game, but there is something special about having that physical copy, Derek, that cover that you can collect.
You might see it on a little card that has a code on it. That's about it, and
Real
that's
special.
not as special.
Yeah. Dariel says, let's just hope they don't come up with a system update that takes away the ability to play the physical disc you already own, thus forcing you to repurchase through digital. And would you put it past them, Derek?
No, not at this point. I hope that wouldn't happen, but, anything is possible.
Martin says, a harsh dose of if buying isn't owning, pirating isn't stealing is going to hit Sony hard if they stick to this line of business. And look, we do not support piracy here on the NLSC podcast for legal reasons as much as anything else. But yeah, a lot of people are saying this, Derek, that if companies aren't going to be fair to consumers, consumers are going to hit back one way or the other.
Yeah, and we're hearing them hit back with their words right now. And I love seeing that, and I love that there are so many people signing these petitions. I love that people are coming up with backup to Sony's claims related to digital and physical sales and whatnot and saying, you guys are not being honest about this. I love the fact that they're hitting back, and that means a lot to me.
Definitely. And finally, Joel says, absolutely terrible. Means that at a certain point, you don't truly own a copy of the game you bought. There's a reason I'm a retro gamer. We have to put customer experience over the chase for more money when it comes to gaming, especially console gaming. We already have too many microtransactions, good grief. Yeah, an excellent summary, Derek.
Yep, no arguments for me.
So that is all the responses we have from Facebook. Thank you to everybody who joined in the conversation this week. Like you said, Derek, it may sound like we're being negative, but I think we're just being real about this situation. Clearly, a lot of people share our concerns, and rightfully so.
Yeah, it's the pulse. I want people to understand that. We're not being negative to be negative. We don't want to come on to the NLSC podcast and not talk positive. But this is an issue that deserves to have light shined on it. And if you look at the majority of the responses to this announcement, the majority of people are not happy about it.
And we will have to see what happens. Will Sony backtrack? I'm not particularly confident about that. But if nothing else, Derek, we'll always have retro gaming.
Yeah, exactly. I love my collection. I love revisiting older games. And there's a lot of content in those games as well to keep you immersed and engaged and whatnot. I don't think Sony will backtrack. I think that this is the future. I think that Microsoft will probably follow suit, and you'll start seeing this in different forms and other ways of life, media and otherwise. And to me, that's incredibly concerning.
And to that point, we will keep receipts. We will come with a "we told you so" in the worst case scenario, although, of course, that will be a bummer for us as well. So please keep the conversation going, but in the meantime, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Also, both we and the NLSC are on social media, and would appreciate a follow. So Derek, go and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, give a look to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.